The first thing Amara Whitfield noticed was not the other woman's smile, or the way the cameras followed her across the ballroom, or even the soft gasp that moved through Manhattan's most powerful guests like wind through glass. It was the necklace. Her necklace. The sapphire pendant rested against Sabrina Vale's throat beneath the chandeliers of the Grand Palazzo Hotel, catching the light in the exact shade of blue Amara remembered from the night Nathaniel Pierce's mother had clasped it around her neck and called her family. For one quiet second, the entire room seemed to disappear. The orchestra faded. The champagne glasses stopped ringing. Even the city beyond the 42nd floor windows, bright and restless beneath the December sky, seemed to hold its breath. Amara stood near the marble staircase in a black silk gown simple enough to be ignored by people who only understood noise, and elegant enough to be remembered by those who recognized restraint. Her bare neck felt suddenly cold, not empty, insulted. Around her, donors, senators, executives, and socialites celebrated the 15th anniversary of Pierce Meridian Group, the empire the world believed Nathaniel had built alone. His photograph hung on the massive digital screens above the stage, smiling beside headlines about leadership, legacy, and American innovation. No one showed the nights Amara spent at their kitchen table with 3 legal pads, a borrowed laptop, and a cup of reheated coffee, rewriting loan agreements while Nathaniel paced behind her, terrified the bank would walk away. No one remembered that she had found the clause that saved their first acquisition, or that she had delayed her own partnership track at a Chicago law firm, because she believed marriage meant building together, not keeping score. Nathaniel remembered once. That was the tragedy. He had not always been cruel. He had once held her hand in the back of a yellow cab after their first investor meeting and whispered, "One day, they'll know what you did for me." But years had a way of turning gratitude into entitlement when a man began mistaking applause for truth. Tonight, he stood beside Sabrina near the center of the ballroom, his white dinner jacket sharp beneath the lights, his silver hair touched perfectly at the temples, his smile polished for cameras and board members. Sabrina laughed at something he said, lifting one hand to the sapphire as if she already knew people were staring. She was beautiful in the practiced way of someone who understood angles, attention, and the power of being chosen publicly. Then Nathaniel looked up and saw Amara watching. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not guilt. Calculation. He crossed the room with the calm confidence of a man who believed every wound could be managed like bad press. "Amara," he said softly, stopping close enough that only she could hear him. "Don't do this here." Her eyes stayed on the necklace. "Do what?" "Make a scene." The words arrived dressed as concern, but underneath them lived a warning. Amara turned her gaze to him then, steady and unreadable. "I haven't said a word." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Behind him, Sabrina touched the sapphire again, and a few women near the champagne tower lowered their voices. "It was sitting in the vault," he said. Sabrina needed something appropriate for tonight. That necklace suited her better with the dress. The sentence landed quietly. That made it worse. There was no anger in it, no regret, not even enough shame to make him look away. Just the careless certainty of a man who had taken a symbol of love, history, and belonging, and treated it like an accessory for his mistake. Amara looked at him for a long moment, and in that silence, 15 years rearranged themselves inside her. Every compromise, every public smile, every dinner where she had been introduced as Nathaniel's wife before anyone mentioned her name. She did not raise her voice. She did not reach for the necklace. She simply slipped the wedding ring from her finger, the diamond flashing once beneath the chandelier, and dropped it into the empty champagne flute on the table beside her. The sound was small, crystal against gold, but Nathaniel heard it. So did Sabrina. So did half the room pretending not to listen. Amara picked up her black clutch and turned toward the balcony doors, her shoulders straight, her steps unhurried. The winter air met her like truth. Below, Manhattan glowed in 1,000 windows, each one holding a life, a secret, a cost. Behind her, the party continued because wealthy rooms were trained to survive discomfort. But Amara knew something had ended. Not her dignity, not her future, only the lie that she needed permission to reclaim what she had built. At midnight, the city would still be awake. So would she. The balcony doors closed behind Amara with a soft click, but the sound reached deeper than thunder. She stood beneath the winter sky, looking down at Fifth Avenue where headlights moved like quiet rivers between the buildings. 34 floors below, people hurried through the cold with scarves pulled tight and coffee cups warming their hands, unaware that above them a marriage had just collapsed without a single raised voice. Amara pressed her palm against the stone railing and let the air steady her. She had learned long ago that pain did not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it entered dressed in a white dinner jacket, carrying a smile for the cameras and a lie polished well enough to pass as charm. The first winter she and Nathaniel were married, they had not owned a ballroom, a penthouse, or a private elevator. They had rented a one-bedroom apartment in Queens with a heater that coughed all night and windows that let the cold slip through the edges. Nathaniel had been 36 then, ambitious and restless, with a business plan no bank wanted to touch and a confidence that cracked whenever no one was watching. Amara had been a rising financial attorney in Chicago, the kind of woman partners trusted with impossible files because she could read danger between the lines. She moved to New York for love, but she brought more than devotion. She brought structure. She brought discipline. She brought the sharp, patient mind that turned his scattered dream into something lenders could understand. On folding chairs in their tiny kitchen, she reviewed contracts until 2 in the morning while Nathaniel slept with his head on his arms beside a stack of unpaid invoices. She found the hidden penalty clause in their first warehouse lease. She challenged the valuation that would have given away control of the company before it had even opened its doors. She was the one who called Jonah Pierce, Nathaniel's father, and convinced the old man that his son did not need another lecture. He needed a bridge. Jonah had listened to her for 47 minutes. The next morning, he invested, not because Nathaniel begged, but because Amara had shown him numbers wrapped in integrity. After that, Pierce Meridian Group began to rise. Slowly at first, then all at once. A logistics contract in New Jersey, a manufacturing acquisition outside Detroit, a clean energy partnership in Texas. Reporters called Nathaniel fearless. Investors called him visionary. At charity dinners, men with cufflinks worth more than Amara's first car shook his hand and asked how it felt to build an empire from nothing. Nathaniel would smile, and sometimes, in the early years, he would reach for Amara's hand under the table. Back then, that small touch had meant, we know the truth. Then the touch disappeared. Then her name disappeared. She became the quiet wife, the elegant wife, the woman standing 3 steps behind him in photographs while headlines made a myth out of one man's ambition. Amara told herself it did not matter. Marriage was not a scoreboard. Love did not need applause. Her mother, Grace Whitfield, had once told her that a strong woman did not have to announce every sacrifice for the sacrifice to be real. But Grace had also warned her about a different kind of silence, the kind that teaches people they can erase you without consequence. Amara had not understood the difference until tonight. The sapphire necklace had belonged to Eleanor Pierce, Nathaniel's mother, a woman Amara had known only 18 months before cancer took her. Eleanor had been reserved, old money in posture, but not in heart. On Amara's first Thanksgiving with the family, when a cousin made a polished comment about how surprising it was that Nathaniel had chosen someone so far outside their circle, Eleanor had placed a hand over Amara's and said, "The strongest roots are rarely visible from the surface." Months before she died, Eleanor gave Amara the necklace in a velvet box the color of midnight. "This family will test your patience," she had said, her voice thin but certain. "Do not let them test your worth." Amara had worn it only on anniversaries and company milestones, never because the sapphire was expensive, but because it reminded her that someone had seen her before the world learned to overlook her. Now Sabrina was wearing it beneath a chandelier, smiling as if inheritance could be borrowed, as if history could be fastened around any throat and become truth. Behind the glass doors, Nathaniel reappeared in the ballroom, accepting congratulations from a senator as though nothing had happened. He did not look toward the balcony. That told Amara everything. She opened her clutch and removed her phone. There were no tears on her face, only the clean stillness that comes when a woman stops pleading with reality and begins answering it. She scrolled past old photographs, past anniversary messages, past years of carefully preserved evidence she had never wanted to need. Then she found the contact she had not called in almost 4 years. Malcolm Reeves. Her thumb hovered for one breath. Then she pressed his name. Malcolm Reeves answered on the 4th ring, his voice rough with sleep, but clear enough to carry concern. Amara. He did not ask why she was calling this late. Good lawyers knew that midnight calls rarely belonged to ordinary problems. She turned her back to the ballroom and watched her reflection appear faintly in the balcony glass, a woman framed by city lights, wearing no necklace and no ring. I need you to find the original Pierce Meridian shareholder agreement, she said. A pause followed, brief but heavy. The version signed before the first outside investment. Yes, that document has not mattered in years. Amara looked through the glass. Sabrina stood near the champagne tower, the sapphire bright against her skin as she accepted compliments from women who knew exactly what they were witnessing and had decided to enjoy the cruelty quietly. It matters tonight. Malcolm's breathing changed, and she knew he had sat up. Tell me what happened. Amara did not tell him everything. Not yet. She gave him facts, because facts were cleaner than humiliation. Nathaniel had transferred a family heirloom without consent. Sabrina Vale, an outside communications consultant with influence over company media strategy, was wearing it at a corporate anniversary event. Corporate funds may have been used for personal image management connected to that relationship. Nathaniel was publicly exposing the company to reputational risk while major investors, board members, and elected officials were in the room. Malcolm listened without interruption. When she finished, he said quietly, "Are you safe?" The question softened something in her chest. Not because she was in danger, but because someone had remembered that betrayal was still harm even when it wore cuff links and smiled for photographers. "I am standing on a balcony at the Grand Palazzo," she said. "There are 500 witnesses and 3 news cameras inside. I am safe." "Good. Then do not confront him again tonight." "I already did." "Did you say anything that could be used against you?" Amara almost smiled. "I removed my ring and walked away." That is the most Amara sentence I have heard in years. For the first time all evening, she exhaled. Beyond the railing, New York stretched in glittering lines. Beautiful, because no single window could tell the whole truth. Malcolm continued, his tone shifting into the precise rhythm she remembered from conference rooms and court filings. "I will pull the archived agreement and the family asset schedule. If Jonah Pierce included the protective governance clause you once mentioned, there may be a temporary voting trigger tied to misconduct, misuse of company resources, or reputational damage." Amara closed her eyes. Jonah. The old man had been difficult, proud, and impossible to flatter, but he had respected competence. Years ago, after a board dinner where Nathaniel had spoken over her twice, Jonah had found Amara in the library and said, "My son loves winning. You understand building. Those are not the same thing." She had thought it was only an observation. Maybe it had been a warning. "How soon can you know?" she asked. "Give me a few hours." "I may not have." "A few hours." Malcolm was silent. Then, carefully, he said, "Amara, legal power is not the same as emotional justice. If you move tonight, move because the company needs protection, not because your heart is bleeding." She opened her eyes. Inside the ballroom, Nathaniel lifted a glass for the cameras. Sabrina stood beside him, close enough to look official, far enough to pretend innocence. The sapphire flashed again. Amara's voice did not tremble. "That company employs 12,000 people. Their retirement funds, their health insurance, their mortgages, their children's tuition, all of it depends on leadership that knows the difference between ownership and ego. I will not let my pain make me reckless, Malcolm, but I will not let his recklessness hide behind my silence either." On the other end of the line, Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "Then leave the event. Go home. Photograph the vault records, the jewelry insurance documents, any board correspondence, and anything connecting Sabrina to company expenditures. Do not delete messages. Do not threaten anyone. Do not post anything online. I know you know. I am reminding the wounded part of you, not the lawyer." That sentence almost broke her. Almost. Amara ended the call and slipped the phone back into her clutch. When she turned, Nathaniel was standing just inside the balcony doors. He must have followed quietly, his face arranged into the familiar expression he used when investors got nervous. Calm. Controlled. False. "Who was that?" he asked. "An old friend." His eyes dropped to her bare hand. "You embarrassed me in there." Amara studied him. 15 years of marriage, and he still believed embarrassment was the wound worth naming. "No, Nathaniel," she said. "I stopped helping you hide." His mouth tightened. You are angry. I understand that. But you need to be careful. Everything we have is connected. I know. Her answer unsettled him more than any accusation could have. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. The necklace was not worth this. Amara looked past him, towards Sabrina and the sapphire, and the room full of people who had mistaken her grace for permission. You are right, she said. The necklace was never the most valuable thing you gave away tonight. Then she walked around him, back through the ballroom, not toward the stage, not toward Sabrina, not toward the whispering guests, but toward the elevators. Every head turned as she passed. No one stopped her. The doors opened with a silver hush. Amara stepped inside alone. As they closed, she saw Nathaniel through the narrowing gap, finally standing still, finally unsure. By the time the elevator began its descent, her reflection had changed. Not louder, not harder, clearer. The elevator opened into the private garage beneath the Grand Palazzo, where the air smelled faintly of rain, gasoline, and polished concrete. Amara's driver, Mr. Callahan, straightened when he saw her walking toward the black town car nearly 40 minutes earlier than scheduled. He had driven her for 8 years and had learned the quiet language of powerful households, the difference between privacy and loneliness, the difference between a woman leaving a party and a woman leaving a life. Home, Mrs. Pierce, he asked gently. For the first time, the name felt like a coat that no longer fit. The penthouse, Amara said. Her voice was calm, but something inside it had closed. The drive up Park Avenue was silent except for the turn signal and the soft sweep of tires over wet pavement. Christmas lights glowed along the storefronts, warm and golden, but Amara watched them without seeing celebration. She saw receipts, dates, signatures. The thousand small ways truth leaves footprints when arrogance believes no one is looking. By the time the car pulled beneath the canopy of the Pierce Tower residence entrance, midnight was less than 12 minutes away. The doorman opened her door, his smile fading when he noticed her bare hand. He said nothing. That kindness mattered. Upstairs, the penthouse waited in perfect order, 58 floors above Manhattan, beautiful enough to impress strangers and cold enough to tell the truth. Floor-to-ceiling windows held the city in silver reflection. The white orchids on the entry table had been replaced that morning. The grand piano Nathaniel never played gleamed beneath recessed lights. On the wall near the library hung their wedding portrait, Amara in ivory, Nathaniel smiling like a man who had just been given a future he did not yet know how to honor. She did not look at it for long. She crossed the marble floor, removed her heels, and walked barefoot into the library where Jonah Pierce's old safe sat behind a row of first-edition business books. Nathaniel had once joked that his father trusted paper more than people. Amara had never laughed. Paper remembered what people tried to revise. Her fingers moved over the keypad. Eleanor's birthday. The safe clicked open on the first try. Inside were leather folders, sealed envelopes, stock certificates, insurance schedules, and the velvet box that should have held the sapphire necklace. Empty. Amara photographed it, then set it aside with the care owed to evidence and memory. Beneath the jewelry records lay a navy folder stamped with the original name of the company, Pierce Meridian Logistics, formed before the consultants, before the skyscraper, before the myth. Her name appeared on page 3. Amara Denise Whitfield, founding legal strategist and initial equity holder. Not ceremonial, not symbolic. Legal. She sat at Jonah's old desk, turned on the brass lamp, and read the agreement line by line while the city blinked beyond the windows. Section 12 covered succession. Section 18 covered emergency governance. Section 21 made her stop breathing for one full second. In the event that the chief executive officer engages in conduct that materially compromises corporate integrity, misuses family trust assets for non-family purposes, or exposes the corporation to reputational and fiduciary harm, dormant voting rights assigned to the founding equity holder may be activated upon documented notice to council and the board. Dormant voting rights assigned to the founding equity holder. Her. Jonah had not given her sentiment. He had given her protection, not because he expected betrayal, perhaps, but because he understood weakness dressed as power. Amara read it again, slower this time, letting the words settle into the places Nathaniel had tried to empty. She was not a guest in his empire. She was written into its foundation. Her phone buzzed. Malcolm. I found it, he said before she could speak. So did I. Then listen carefully. Do not act emotionally. Send me photographs of the clause, the asset schedule, the empty jewelry box, and anything showing the necklace was part of the Pierce family trust. I will prepare formal notice to the board tonight. Amara looked at the velvet box. Can it move that quickly? If the anniversary event created public exposure, yes. If corporate funds were involved with Sabrina Vale, even more so. If Nathaniel transferred a trust asset without authorization, the board has a duty to respond. The word duty landed cleanly. Not revenge. Duty. She opened Nathaniel's desk drawer, the one he thought she never touched, and found the gala expense folder placed neatly beside a silver pen. Vendor invoices. Media consulting retainers. Image strategy fees billed through Pierce Meridian. Sabrina's firm appeared on 3 pages. Amara scanned them without smiling. The truth did not need celebration. It only needed light. At 12:03 in the morning, she sent the files to Malcolm. At 12:11, formal notice went to the executive board. At 12:26, the emergency governance clause was triggered pending review. Amara stood by the window as the confirmation arrived. The city reflected behind her like a crown made of glass and consequence. She did not feel victorious. Victory was too loud a word for a night like this. She felt awake. For years, she had protected Nathaniel from storms he created and called it love. Tonight, she protected herself, the company, and every person whose paycheck depended on a leader remembering that power was not a toy for wounded pride. On Jonah's desk, the empty velvet box remained open beneath the lamp. Amara touched its edge once, then closed it. The sapphire would return, but she would never again wear it as proof that she belonged. She had found the proof in ink. By 1:15 in the morning, the penthouse no longer felt like a home. It felt like an archive. Amara moved through each room with the careful focus of a woman sorting truth from memory. In the bedroom, Nathaniel's side of the closet still smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne, his cuff links arranged in velvet trays, his watches lined in perfect rows as if order could disguise carelessness. On the dresser sat a photograph from their 5th anniversary in Napa Valley, Nathaniel's arm around her waist, Amara wearing the sapphire under the pale California sun. She remembered that day with painful clarity. He had toasted her in front of friends and said she was the reason he believed in impossible things. Now the same man had allowed another woman to wear that promise in a ballroom full of witnesses. Amara placed the photograph face down, not in anger. In conclusion, her phone buzzed again. Malcolm had created a secure folder and asked for anything that established pattern, authorization, and misuse. Pattern. The word mattered. One bad choice could be explained away by embarrassment. A pattern became evidence. She opened the laptop Nathaniel kept in the study for household finances. She did not hack. She did not search what was private. She used only shared accounts, board communications, family trust documents, and company files she was legally authorized to access. That distinction steadied her. Pain wanted shortcuts. Dignity refused them. In the shared expense archive, she found the first invoice from Sabrina Vale's firm, 8 months earlier, labeled Executive Media Refinement. Then another, marked Reputation Strategy. Then a third, billed to the company after a weekend retreat in Palm Beach that Nathaniel had described as investor relations. Amara downloaded the files, saved the dates, and matched them against calendar entries. There were hotel charges, styling fees, private event consultations, and one entry that made her hands still over the trackpad. Sapphire Appraisal Update, Pierce Family Trust Asset, released for anniversary presentation. Released. Not gifted. Not transferred. Released under false internal language, dressed up as a presentation item while Sabrina had worn it like a prize. Amara sent everything to Malcolm. Minutes later, he called. "This is enough for temporary action," he said. "It does not prove every ethical violation yet, but it proves the board must investigate. I am also sending notice to the trust attorney. The necklace should be recovered as a protected family asset." Amara looked toward the hallway, where the city's reflection trembled across the marble like water. "Do not make this about the necklace alone." "I will not. I mean it, Malcolm. I do not want them turning this into a jealous wife story." His voice softened. "They may try. Then we do not give them room." She sat at Jonah's desk again, opened a blank document, and began writing a statement for the board. Not for the press. Not for revenge. For record, she wrote that corporate leadership required accountability. She wrote that personal misconduct became a governance issue when it compromised trust assets, company funds, stakeholder confidence, and fiduciary judgment. She wrote that the employees of Pierce Meridian deserved stability, not spectacle. She did not write that her hands were cold. She did not write that her ring finger felt strangely light. She did not write that she could still hear Nathaniel saying the necklace suited Sabrina better. Some truths belonged to the heart. Others belonged in evidence. At 2:40 in the morning, Amara called Grace Whitfield in Atlanta. Her mother answered with the alertness of someone who had raised children, worked double shifts, and learned that late-night calls carried weight. "Baby," Grace said. That one word nearly undid her. Amara closed her eyes. "He humiliated me tonight." Silence followed. Not empty silence, but the kind that made space for the truth to enter without shame. "Tell me only what you can say without breaking," Grace said. So Amara told her. Not every legal detail, not every document, but enough. The gala, Sabrina, the sapphire, the board notice. The old Claus Jonah had left behind like a lantern in a locked room. Grace listened. When Amara finished, her mother exhaled slowly. "Do you remember what I told you when you married into that family? You told me not to confuse access with acceptance." "And what else?" Amara looked at the skyline, every tower silver at the edges. "You told me love should never require me to disappear." "That is right. So do what needs doing. But do not let bitterness be the voice people hear. Let truth be the voice. Bitterness burns the hand carrying it. Truth opens doors." Amara wiped one tear before it reached her chin. She allowed that single tear. It had earned its place. "I am tired, Mama." "I know. But tired is not defeated." After the call, Amara changed out of the black silk gown and folded it over a chair. She put on a charcoal suit, low heels, and the pearl earrings she wore to serious meetings. By 3:30, Malcolm had confirmed that an emergency board session was scheduled for 7 in the morning. Nathaniel had been notified. Sabrina's firm had been asked to preserve all records. The trust attorney had issued a retrieval request for the sapphire. The machine had begun to move, not with rage, but with procedure. Amara stood before the mirror in the entry hall. Without the necklace, without the ring, without Nathaniel's name carrying her forward, she looked less adorned and more exact. At 4 o'clock, the first pale line of dawn touched the windows. The city was not awake yet, but it was getting there. So was she. At 6:45 in the morning, Amara entered Pierce Meridian Tower through the private executive entrance, not because she wanted to avoid anyone, but because the building was not ready for the truth to arrive through the lobby. The security guard behind the desk looked up, surprised to see her without Nathaniel, then stood a little straighter when he noticed the charcoal suit, the leather folder in her hand, and the calm in her face. "Good morning, Mrs. Pierce," he said. Amara paused just long enough to meet his eyes. "Good morning, Daniel." He blinked softly, as if the sound of his own name mattered more than he expected. It did. Names mattered. Being seen mattered. That was one of the first things Power forgot. The elevator rose toward the 72nd floor in silence, passing offices where thousands of people would soon arrive with lunch bags, laptop cases, daycare schedules, mortgage worries, and quiet hopes for a stable day. Amara thought of them as the numbers climbed. She thought of warehouse managers in Ohio, engineers in Texas, accountants in New Jersey, receptionists in Chicago, drivers, analysts, assistants, people whose lives should not tremble because one man had mistaken a corporation for his personal mirror. When the doors opened, Malcolm Reeves was waiting outside the boardroom with a navy tie slightly crooked and a stack of documents under one arm. He looked older than he had at midnight, but steadier. "The board is inside," he said. "Nathaniel arrived 10 minutes ago." "Sabrina?" "Not present." Her firm's counsel sent a preservation acknowledgement. The trust attorney confirmed a formal demand for return of the necklace by noon. Amara nodded. The word necklace no longer pierced her the same way. It had become evidence now, and evidence did not glitter. It clarified. Malcolm lowered his voice. "They will try to make this personal." "It is personal," Amara said. "But it is not only personal." He held her gaze for a second, then opened the door. The boardroom faced east, and the morning sun poured through the glass wall in pale gold, softening nothing. 12 directors sat around the long walnut table, some in person, some present through screens glowing at the far end. Nathaniel stood near the window with his jacket unbuttoned and his phone in his hand, looking as if the night had followed him but not humbled him. His eyes found Amara immediately. For a moment, she saw the husband who once brought her coffee in chipped mugs at 2 in the morning. Then his expression hardened into performance. "This is unnecessary," he said before anyone greeted her. "Good morning to you too," Amara replied, and took the empty seat across from him. The chair had belonged to Jonah Pierce. No one commented on that. Malcolm distributed the packets while the board chair, Helen Markham, adjusted her glasses and called the emergency session to order. Helen was 70 years old, silver-haired, exacting, and allergic to theatrics. She looked first at Nathaniel, then at Amara. "We are here to determine whether temporary governance action is required under Section 21 of the original founding agreement." Nathaniel gave a short laugh without warmth. "A clause from before half this board was appointed. This is absurd." Amara opened her folder. "It is still active. You are angry because of a necklace. I am concerned because of unauthorized trust asset use, undisclosed conflicts involving an outside consultant, reputational exposure at a company-sponsored event, and corporate expenditures that require review." The room changed after that. Not dramatically, just enough. A few directors looked down at the documents. One screen flickered as someone leaned closer. Nathaniel's face tightened. "You collected files from my office, from shared corporate and trust records to which I have legal access. You are my wife. I am also a founding equity holder." The words settled across the table with quiet force. Nathaniel looked at Helen as if expecting rescue, but Helen was reading page 4. The first report appeared on the main screen. Sabrina Vale Communications, billed through executive strategy, with dates, amounts, and event notes. Then the family trust schedule. Then the appraisal update. Then the photograph of the empty velvet box. No raised voices. No accusations beyond what paper could carry. That was the power of doing things correctly. Nathaniel tried again, but his confidence had begun to fray at the edges. This company cannot function if private marital disagreements become board matters. Amara looked at him fully. This company cannot function if its chief executive officer believes accountability stops at his wedding ring. Silence. Even the city beyond the windows seemed distant. Helen removed her glasses. "Mr. Pierce, pending internal review, I am recommending temporary suspension of discretionary executive authority, activation of dormant voting rights as outlined, and appointment of an interim acting chair to stabilize operations." Nathaniel stared at her. "You cannot be serious." "I am very serious." The vote took 7 minutes. 7 minutes to measure 15 years. 7 minutes for people who had praised Nathaniel in public to decide whether the company was larger than his pride. When the final vote was recorded, Helen turned toward Amara. "Mrs. Pierce, under emergency governance authority, the board recognizes you as acting chairwoman pending full review." Amara did not smile. She did not look at Nathaniel for permission. She placed both hands on the table Jonah Pierce had once owned and spoke clearly. Pierce Meridian was built to move goods, create jobs, and honor trust. It was never meant to become one man's throne. My first act is to freeze all discretionary image consulting expenses, protect employee benefits from market uncertainty, and commission an independent ethics review. No one in this company, from the loading dock to the executive floor, should pay for leadership's failure to respect boundaries. Across the room, Nathaniel lowered himself into a chair as if standing had suddenly become too difficult. Amara noticed, but she did not let pity interrupt truth. Morning light touched the empty place at her throat, and for the first time, the absence did not feel like loss. It felt like room to breathe. By 9:30 that morning, the story had already begun moving through the city in whispers, not because Amara released it, but because truth has a way of escaping rooms built to contain it. A senator's aide had seen Sabrina wearing the sapphire. A junior photographer had captured Nathaniel standing too close beside her beneath the company banner. 2 board assistants had watched Amara walk into the emergency meeting before sunrise and walk out as acting chairwoman. No one had the full picture, so everyone invented pieces. By 10:15, Sabrina Vale arrived at her firm's Madison Avenue office wearing dark sunglasses large enough to hide fear, but not consequences. The sapphire was gone from her throat. She had removed it before leaving the hotel, But removal was not return, and return was no longer a courtesy. It was a legal demand. Her office, usually warm with white roses and framed magazine features, felt smaller that morning. Her assistant would not meet her eyes. Her phone rang without mercy. Reporters wanted comments. Clients wanted reassurance. Her attorney wanted silence. Nathaniel sent one message. Do not say anything. It was not comfort. It was containment. Sabrina stared at the words and understood, maybe for the first time, that borrowed power did not come with shelter. At 11:58, she arrived at Pierce Meridian Tower through a side entrance with the velvet box in a paper bag from a luxury boutique, as if packaging could soften what it held. Malcolm Reeves met her in a conference room on the 48th floor with the trust attorney, 2 compliance officers, and a receipt form placed neatly on the table. Amara was not supposed to be there. She had meetings with department heads, employee relations, investor communications, and the independent review team. Still, at 12:06, she stepped into the room. Sabrina looked up quickly, her face pale beneath careful makeup. Without the necklace, she seemed less dangerous and more young, not in age, but in judgment. She had mistaken proximity to a powerful man for power itself, and now the room was teaching her the difference. Amara wore the same charcoal suit from the boardroom, her hair pinned back, her expression neither cruel nor forgiving. Mrs. Pierce, Sabrina said, then stopped, as if the name itself had edges. Acting chairwoman is fine, Malcolm said quietly. Amara gave him a look that softened the correction without removing it. Amara is fine for this room, she said. Sabrina swallowed and placed the paper bag on the table. The trust attorney opened it with white gloves, removed the velvet box, and lifted the sapphire into the light. It glowed as beautifully as it had the night before, indifferent to the hands that had misused it. That was the strange thing about objects. People poured meaning into them, but objects did not choose sides. I did not know it was a trust asset, Sabrina said. Her voice was low. Nathaniel told me it was his. Amara studied her. Did he tell you it belonged to his mother? Sabrina looked down. That answer was enough. Malcolm slid the return receipt forward. Sabrina signed with a hand that trembled only once. The compliance officer collected the documents, and for a moment it seemed the meeting was over. Then Sabrina spoke again, softer this time. I know you probably think I wanted to humiliate you. Amara looked at the sapphire resting in its box. Did you? Sabrina's silence filled the room more honestly than any apology. Finally, she said, I wanted to feel chosen. There it was. Not a defense. Not an excuse. A small, human truth with ugly consequences. Amara could have used it like a blade. She did not. Being chosen by someone who is betraying another person is not love, she said. It is a warning. Sabrina's eyes shone, but Amara did not rescue her from discomfort. Some lessons had to be felt fully, or they became decoration. Your contract with Pierce Meridian is suspended pending review, Malcolm said. You are required to preserve all communications, invoices, calendars, and related records. Sabrina nodded. She looked once more at Amara, perhaps expecting rage, perhaps hoping for pity. Amara offered neither. Never mistake access for ownership, she said. Not to jewelry, not to a company, not to a life another woman helped build. The words landed without volume and left no room for performance. Sabrina left the room minutes later without cameras, without applause, without the sapphire. In the hallway, employees stepped aside politely, not because they knew every detail, but because they could recognize a fall when they saw one wrapped in designer wool. Amara remained in the conference room after everyone else had gone. The trust attorney closed the velvet box and set it before her. Would you like it returned to the family vault? He asked. Amara touched the lid lightly. Yesterday, that box had represented insult. Today, it represented recovery. Not of marriage. Not of innocence. Of record. Yes, she said. For now. Through the glass wall, she could see the city moving under a clean winter sun. Somewhere upstairs, Nathaniel was learning that silence was not surrender. Somewhere downstairs, 12,000 employees were arriving at their desks, unaware that their company had been steadied before panic could reach them. And somewhere inside Amara, grief was still present, but it had stepped behind purpose. That was the beginning of freedom. Nathaniel did not come to Amara while the building was awake. That would have required humility in daylight, and daylight had never been kind to men who loved their reflection more than the truth. He waited until after 7 that evening, when most of the executive floor had emptied, when the assistants had gone home, when the winter sky beyond the windows had turned the color of slate and the city lights began to replace the sun. Amara was in Jonah Pierce's old office, reviewing employee benefit protections with a yellow legal pad beside her and a cup of untouched tea growing cold near the edge of the desk. She had moved there only temporarily, but the room already felt different. Jonah's heavy leather chair was still behind the desk. His framed maritime maps still lined the walls. His old brass clock still counted seconds with patient authority. Amara had not added flowers. She had not moved photographs. She did not need the room to become hers in appearance. She only needed its decisions to become honorable. The knock came once. Not commanding, not confident, almost unfamiliar. "Come in," she said without looking up. Nathaniel entered and closed the door behind him. He had changed out of the white dinner jacket from the night before into a dark suit, but nothing about him looked renewed. His tie was loose, his eyes shadowed, his face stripped of the polished ease that usually carried him through boardrooms and cameras. For the first time in years, he looked like a man standing outside the life he had assumed would always open for him. Amara finished marking a line on the document before raising her eyes. "If this is about the board decision, Malcolm should be present." "It is not." His voice was lower than she expected. "Then say what you came to say." Nathaniel looked around the office, and the sight of his father's things seemed to weaken whatever speech he had prepared. His gaze stopped on Jonah's brass clock. "He always liked you in this room. Your father liked anyone who read before speaking." A faint, sad curve touched Nathaniel's mouth, but it disappeared quickly. "He trusted you more than me sometimes. He trusted the person paying attention." The sentence was not meant to wound, but it did. Nathaniel absorbed it in silence. Then he walked to the window, stopping several feet away from her desk, as if he finally understood distance could be a form of respect. "I told myself a story," he said. "For years. I told myself you wanted the quiet role, that you preferred being above the mess, that I was protecting you from pressure by keeping your name out of it." Amara said nothing. He turned back. But that was not protection. It was convenience. The clock ticked between them. "Yes," she said. "One word. No rescue." He swallowed. "Last night, when you took off your ring, I was angry because people saw it. This morning, when the board voted, I was angry because they believed you. Then I sat alone in the conference room after everyone left, and I read the original filings Malcolm gave Helen. Your notes were everywhere. Your revisions. Your initials. Your warnings in the margins. I had not looked at those pages in years." His voice changed, not breaking, but losing its armor. "I built a monument to myself with your fingerprints under every stone." Amara looked down at her hands, folded neatly on Jonah's desk. She remembered those fingerprints. Ink smudges at dawn. Paper cuts. Cheap coffee. Hope. "Why are you here, Nathaniel?" He took a breath. To apologize without asking for anything. That caught her more than any excuse would have. She leaned back slightly, waiting. "I humiliated you," he said. "Not only last night. Before that. In interviews, in rooms, in all the small ways I let people shrink you because it made my story cleaner. I let Sabrina wear my mother's necklace because I wanted to feel admired without being known. That is a poor reason. A shameful one. And when you stood there, I still thought about my embarrassment before your pain." The words were late. They were also true. That made them harder to hate. Amara looked past him to the city, where office windows glowed like thousands of separate verdicts. "Do you love her?" she asked. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. "No." I liked how I looked reflected in her attention. Amara nodded once. It was the most honest answer he had given in months. "And me?" He opened his eyes. "I loved you badly. Then I loved what you allowed me to become more than I loved you." There it was. The shape of the ruin. Not passion. Not destiny. Ego, fed slowly until it learned to call itself need. Amara stood and walked to the side table where the velvet box rested, returned from the vault attorney for her signature before final storage. She did not open it. "Your mother gave me this because she wanted me to know I belonged," she said. "Last night, you used it to tell me I did not." Nathaniel's face tightened with grief he had finally earned. "I am sorry. I believe you." Hope moved across his face, fragile and dangerous. Amara met it gently, then removed it. "But belief is not restoration." He looked down. "Is there any path back?" "To the company, maybe, if the review allows it, and if you learn accountability without applause. To me, no. The final word did not fall loudly. It settled. Nathaniel nodded slowly, as if something inside him had bowed at last. Amara's voice softened, but did not weaken. Forgiveness is not a door I owe you. It is a room I build inside myself, so I do not have to live in bitterness. You may receive my forgiveness one day. You will not receive my life again. Outside, the city kept shining. Inside, Nathaniel Pierce stood with empty hands in the office his father had left behind, facing the woman he had underestimated until she became the mirror he could no longer escape. By spring, Pierce Meridian Tower no longer looked like a monument to one man. It looked like a place where people could breathe again. The Independent Ethics Review had taken 9 weeks, 300 interviews, and more binders than the boardroom shelves could hold. Nathaniel remained away from daily leadership, required to complete governance training, restitution agreements, and a formal accountability plan before any future role could be considered. Sabrina Vale's firm lost its contract and quietly rebuilt under stricter oversight, a consequence neither dramatic nor cruel, but clean. The sapphire necklace returned to the family vault until Amara decided what it meant to her outside of marriage. The divorce moved forward with the same precision she had brought to every contract she ever touched. No public interviews. No tearful statements. No revenge tour. When reporters waited near the courthouse steps, Amara walked past them in a navy coat, her face calm beneath the soft April light, and said only, "Respect is not a luxury. It is the foundation of every partnership, personal or professional." That sentence traveled farther than any scandal could have. It appeared on morning shows, in business columns, and in quiet texts between women who had spent years being called supportive when they had been essential. But Amara did not let the world turn her pain into entertainment. She turned it into structure. On the first Monday of May, Pierce Meridian announced the Whitfield Leadership Foundation, a $10 million initiative supporting women of color in finance, logistics, law, and corporate governance. The foundation offered scholarships, paid internships, legal clinics for small business owners, and executive mentorship for women who had been taught to make themselves smaller to survive rooms that should have made space for them. Amara held the launch in the same ballroom where everything had broken open, not because she wanted to relive humiliation, but because dignity sometimes returns to the place of injury and changes the meaning of the room. The chandeliers were still there. The marble staircase still curved like a question. The city still glittered beyond the windows. But this time, the guest list looked different. Warehouse supervisors stood beside senators. First-generation college students stood beside chief financial officers. Mothers brought daughters. Young women in borrowed blazers stood near the front with notebooks pressed to their chests, watching Amara as if she were proof that survival could become architecture. Grace Whitfield sat in the first row, wearing a cream suit and the peaceful expression of a mother who had watched her daughter choose truth without losing tenderness. When Amara stepped onto the stage, she wore a simple white dress and the sapphire necklace. The room noticed. Of course it did. The stone caught the light, blue and clear against her skin, but it no longer looked like a symbol of belonging to the Pierce family. It looked like a witness. Amara touched it once before speaking. "This necklace was once given to me as a welcome," she said. "Then it was used to remind me how easily people can confuse possession with power. Today, I wear it as a reminder that no object, no title, no last name, and no room full of applause can define a woman who has already defined herself." The applause rose slowly, then fully, not the polished applause of donors protecting appearances, but the kind that comes when people recognize a truth they needed language for. Amara waited until the room settled. This foundation exists because talent is everywhere, but access is not. Respect should not depend on wealth, race, marriage, status, or who chooses to stand beside you. Respect is owed because every human being carries a story that deserves not to be erased. In the back of the ballroom, Nathaniel stood alone near the doors. He had not been invited as a husband. He had come as a donor under board supervision, quiet, humbled, and careful not to take space that was no longer his. Amara saw him. She did not look away. She also did not move toward him. Some chapters deserved acknowledgement, not return. He placed one hand over his heart, a small gesture of apology offered without expectation. She gave him a brief nod, not warm enough to reopen the past, not cold enough to deny growth. Then she turned back to the room. That was her victory, not his regret, not Sabrina's fall, not the headlines that had finally learned her name. Her victory was the young woman in the front row who raised her hand during the question session and asked how to protect her ideas when powerful people tried to claim them. Her victory was the warehouse supervisor who cried quietly when Amara announced leadership grants for frontline employees. Her victory was Grace whispering, "That is my girl," beneath the applause. Months earlier, Amara had stood on a balcony with an empty throat and a breaking heart. She had believed something precious had been taken from her. But time, truth, and courage had revealed the deeper lesson. The necklace had not made her worthy. The marriage had not made her powerful. The empire had not made her visible. She had been worthy when she was reading contracts under flickering kitchen lights. She had been powerful when she chose restraint over spectacle. She had been visible even when others refused to see. At midnight, she had not stolen an empire. She had saved it from forgetting its purpose. And in saving it, she had saved the most important thing of all, the part of herself that still believed power should protect, love should respect, and dignity should never have to beg for a place at the table.